And now, finally, I think the problem has been fixed. So, apologies for not being able to switch on the camera. I really don't know what happened. I had to restart the computer and now it's all working again. So in today's lesson, we are going to we'll carry on discussing the Munsell color system. And we will be talking about so many amazing things. I mean, I'm really so excited about this lesson. We will work now in practice and we will be able to mix the colors and paint a few simple shapes. I will also show you what happens when you subvert some of the principles that we will learn today. As usual, I will also show you an example of 19th century academic drawings. I've decided to show again Henrique Pousão, and we'll talk also about composition. Things like the Fibonacci ratio, the golden ratio, etc. Is that true? Is that not true? Today's lesson will be just an introduction to composition. I will keep talking about it next week, okay? Because it's a vast subject and we can only learn one or two things at a time. So please press the like button straight away if you can hear me and see me well, and write on the comments where you are coming from, which university, which part of the world. Write it now. And I can see 3 people are now watching. I hope many more will join soon. So today's lesson is going to be the continuation of what we discussed last time. Do you remember when I was showing you that everything in terms of color can be a matter of just 3 ingredients? I'm exaggerating, of course, there are a few more subtleties, but generally speaking, you only have 3 ingredients that are truly necessary. The most important by far is value, so it's light and dark. Watch last week's lesson so you can learn more about it, okay? The second most important is chroma, how colorful or how muted a color is. And the least important of all is hue. All right? So that's the least important of all. And what I want to do now is I want to show you first what happens when we are painting a sphere. Okay? So if you look at the image that I also showed last week, so we're just doing a very quick revision of what we talked about last week. So imagine you are painting a yellow sphere. What you can do, definitely, when you're painting a yellow sphere, is you are going to look at the bright colors, so things like cadmium lemon, or you name it, Hansa yellow deep. Those are the bright yellows, Hansa yellow. And then if you look into the shadows, look what happens. They become more like raw amber or burnt amber if you're talking orange yellows. So one way to darken yellow is to add raw amber. By definition, raw amber is just a very dark yellow. And of course it's going to behave differently than if you add black. We will talk about it later. But for now, I just want you to remember this sphere that we saw last week. Does everybody remember this? This is very useful, so you know where you are moving in the color space. Okay? It's a very useful image to look at. And what I'm going to do next is we're going to start painting a yellow circle. And as it darkens, it becomes more and more like raw amber in color. But, question to the group, and I would like you all to answer now. Are the colors always bright throughout the sphere? Do we need to add some grays as well? And if so, where are we adding the grays? Write it down on the comment below. So I'm going to give you a few options. Option 1, the lights are the brightest. They're the ones with the highest chroma. They're the most colorful of all, the lights. And the shadows are the least colorful of all. This is option 1. Option 2, the lights are very colorful. The terminator is very gray, and the shadows can be very colorful as well. Which of these two do you think is more true to life? Write it down. And the third option, the lights are muted and grayish. The terminator is the most colorful of all, and the shadows are usually muted as well. So let me know which of the three options appeals to you the most. Where do you have more color? Is it in the lights? Is it in the terminator? Is it in the shadows? Write it down on the comments below. So we are already getting some answers, and very soon we're going to paint a sphere. So get your yellow paints out. And I also want you to get your blue paints out. We are going to paint a blue sphere as well. All right? So I'm about to start now with the materials. And only Rob is replying. Come on, guys, I want everybody. Aha. So we have quite a few options. Some people say the shadows are warm but muted. The terminator is the most colorful. I'm just reading some of the comments now. Some people say the third option. Mario says in the light. Timney says terminators are the most colorful. Vishal as well, terminators are the most colorful. Okay, and now we are going to reveal the secret. And Mario, you are correct. There is more color in the light. Terminators have less color. Okay, so I'm going to start by painting, and what I'm going to do now is I'm literally just going to turn the camera to the paper. I've stuck a piece of paper here so that you guys can see what I'm about to paint. So this looks, yeah, this doesn't look extremely amazing, but it doesn't really matter either, because we will make it amazing. Just give me a second. I'm just setting up here the computer and putting it out of the way. So I believe that now you can wonder what we are going to do. And literally, let's start with last week's demonstration. I want to show you one thing, okay? Very, very, very briefly. I want to show you that the moment you have some white and the moment you have some black, so we are going to talk now about last week's lesson. I said that black and white make a bluish color. Do you recall that? And I want to demonstrate this for you. So the moment you have some black and the moment you have some white and you mix them together, you get an extremely bluish tone. And this kind of gray, what it's going to do is that it's going to turn any kind of yellow that you mix it with, it becomes green. So everybody, Remember that to make neutral grays, you should not be using just black and white. Otherwise, you're going to end up with green colors. If you're working with yellow shades and so on, everything will become bluish if you just use black and white to make gray. Okay? And what I have down here is just a jug with water. And we're going to get started now with a little bit of color theory. So, we have some yellow. We are going to assume that we're painting a sphere that is going to be yellow. As always, I want you to simplify before you complexify. So the first part of the sphere, we're just going to leave it now in the light. The second part of the sphere, we are going to darken it considerably. And what we're going to do, I would like everybody to be painting at home, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to make this quite flattish. It's going to be just a rough sketch. Today's lesson is not about spending a lot of time getting details or so on. It's just general principles. And once we have a beginning of a sphere, we need to somehow correct the color temperature. So I've told you that black by itself many times behaves like blue. And because it behaves like blue, we need to add something warm, something like brown, you see? And essentially what happens is when you mix a touch of brown into the color, it becomes more yellow again. It becomes less green. Because brown is a shade of what? Please write it down. Brown is a shade of... What is brown? Write it down, okay? Now that we have the beginning of a sphere, the very, very, very beginning, and I would like everybody to keep writing in the comments below, because I'm asking you very interesting questions. And what we need to do now is we need to drop the intensity so we can make the terminator slightly darker than the rest of the shadow. No problem with that. And what we're going to do is we are going now to start playing. I'm literally using the paper as the palette. What we are going to do now is we're going to start playing with chroma. We are going to bring down the chroma in these regions. We are going to make the color more muddy, less vibrant. And we are going to allow just the lights to be the most colorful of all. Do you understand? Essentially, we have now three colors. We have a very, very, very colorful light. We have a very, very, very grayish shadow. We have a very grayish half light moving towards the terminator. The terminator itself can become almost gray, so I'm actually going to exaggerate it just to show you how gray we can go in the terminator. It can go really, really, really dull, okay? And then the shadow can be, again, if you want, quite colorful, and I will demonstrate that in a second. But for now, we'll start blending the tones here. I'm using acrylics because they dry very fast and it's just very simple as a demonstration. So we have this kind of sphere where you have maximum chroma, maximum vividness of color in the light, and then it drops towards gray. And then in the shadow, I said that shadows can be as dull as you want, or they can be a bit more vivid. So I'll demonstrate. I'm actually going now to contaminate the shadow color and make it slightly brighter. So why does this work? this works because in the shadows, this could have been a reflected light. This could have been literally coming from a brown surface next to the sphere. So you would have a reflected bright color. Do you understand? Shadows are very, very easy to be contaminated with reflected light coming from other objects. And what I want you now to learn as well is what we call specular lights, or if you prefer, highlights. So for example, we have a shiny sphere. Highlights are the color of the light source. So bear with me for a second. I'm actually going to have to talk directly to you on the camera, because this is now an important thing that I've just said. Bear with me for a second, okay? That means that if the light source is pinkish, imagine a sunset light, then the highlight on the sphere would be pinkish too. The sphere itself would still stay quite yellow, maybe a pinkish yellow, but it's in the highlight, it's in the brightest highlights that you represent the exact color of the light source. Do you understand? What about if the light source was greenish? Write on the comments below, what color would the highlight be if the light that is coming to the sphere is greenish? What about if the light is bluish? For example, the blue sky. You have a shiny object in the shadow of the wall. There's a building, there is a shiny blue, let's imagine a shiny red object, red, okay? And it's very shiny, like shiny glass or shiny plastic, red plastic. And the only light that is hitting that red object is the blue light coming from the blue sky. What color would the reflection be on the red, shiny plastic? Write it on the comments below. And I'm just gonna read some of the comments. Indeed, brown is a shade of orange, definitely. Brown is a reddish version of the yellow, exactly. So a reddish version of yellow means orange, indeed. Brown is just dark orange, generally speaking. You might have pale browns, but it's the same. It's dark orange with white, or it's dark, it's dark orange. Indeed, if the light is green, then the reflection will be greenish. If the light is pink, then the reflection will be pinkish. And now let me show you again the sphere. So if the light is yellow, the reflection will be yellowish. If the light is white, as it is in this case, then the reflection will be white. So the reflection is the part of the image. The reflection here is the part of the image that best describes the color of the light. And I want you to learn this. If you are painting a sunrise, and if you have glossy objects, make sure the reflection is the exact color of the sun, of the rising sun. You got it? What about the yellow of the sphere? Does the yellow of the sphere change color a lot with the color of the light? Write now on the comments below and write full sentences. So write, the yellow changes a lot with the color of the light, or the yellow changes less than the reflection with the color of the light. So does the yellow change as much as the reflection with different colors of light? Yes or no? Write full sentences, okay? Timney, purple color, what was the question? I think you guys are hearing my live stream maybe 20 or 30 seconds behind, because YouTube takes a few minutes to process the video. So please write full sentences. I really appreciate that. Write full sentences so I understand what you are talking about. So my question now is, let's just look at the light area. Does the yellow color change more or less than the reflective color if you change the color of the light? Write full sentences, okay? Write, the yellow changes less than the reflection if the light color changes. For example, a bluish light. Does the yellow become green? Does the yellow become as blue as the blue reflection? Write it down, okay? And Rob already replied, and very correctly, that the color of the object does not change so much compared to the color of the reflection when the color of the light changes. So it's really the reflection, and pretty much the reflection only, that will show you the true color of the light. The color of the object does not change so much, indeed. So, Rob, I think you deserve an applause. Well done. Well answered. Another question. Students, please write it down. Imagine that the light now becomes bluish. Does the color of the terminator change as much as the yellow and the reflection, or does it change less? Write full sentences so I understand what you guys are talking about, okay? Is the terminator here more or less influenced by the color of the light than the areas of light and then the reflection? So write a full sentence and tell me, in hierarchy, which one changes the most if the light source became bluish, for example? We know already it's the reflection that changes the most. Then changes less would be the yellow. The yellow would become just a little bit bluish, which means a bit greenish. And what about the terminator? Would the terminator become quite blue? Write it down. I want to know your answers. While you guys are writing, I'm going to talk about shadows. So Timney says that the terminator is less influenced. The terminator does not change as much as the light areas if you change the color of the light. Aha! So you also deserve an applause. Indeed, the terminator is the least influenced by the color of the light. Also because the terminator is the least colorful. That's also another reason, you know? What about shadows? This deserves me staring at the camera. One of the stories that we learn in fine art schools is that warm lights create cool shadows. And cool lights create warm shadows. I'm sure you've heard this before, haven't you? So, if the light is orangey, if it's warm, then you should have bluish shadows. And if the light is bluish, then you should have warm, reddish or orangey shadows. Did you hear that before? Write on the comments below. And my question is, is this rule correct or incorrect? Write full sentences, explain exactly what is in your head by writing a full sentence, okay? If the light is orangey, you get bluish shadows, don't you? For example, there is a sunset, part of a white wall is orange, the one facing the light, and the white wall facing the shadow, you've probably noticed many times, is very blue. Is this caused by the warm light? Yes or no? And write a full explanation. I wanna see nice texts to read. Okay? And I'll keep painting, and I'll keep showing you that we have a lot of things still to learn. So imagine that the object, imagine that the yellow sphere is right next to a bright orange surface. Okay? Imagine. What color would the shadow be? We already know the shadow color would have been contaminated by reflections coming from the surrounding orange color. You got it? Just make it disappear a bit. There you go. And what about if the background color was, for example, blue? What happens if the color next to the shadow was bright blue? Sorry, I realized I didn't show you what I was doing. If the color next to the sphere is very orange, then the shadow color will also be quite orange. Of course, the further away, the less orange, the nearer, the more orange. Understood? But what about if this color becomes, for example, bright blue? What happens to the shadow color? Write it down. Meanwhile, I'm going to read some of the comments below. I'm going to read some of the comments below. So we have now Timmy says that shadows don't get affected by the light source. Shadow color comes from the surface color. This is very good, okay? They do get affected by the light source because the color of the light in the end is what feeds all the colors we see. But it's also true what you've said, that the surface color affects it more, much more, than the color of the light. Deepanjali, we've got shadows won't be influenced by light as it stands at the opposite side of light or in the absence of light. That is partially true. So in a dark universe, if you were in outer space, of course that the color of the shadow would be black and it wouldn't be affected by the light. But in this universe, because you have reflections coming from everywhere in the room, for example, the sphere receives a lot of reflected light. I will reveal the secret in a second. Meanwhile, I'm going to make a demonstration. If the surface next to the sphere was blue, so let's assume that the orange already dried. So if the surface next to the sphere was blue instead, I'm going to add a touch of white, okay, so we can see it more clearly. There we go. So if the surface was bluish, then the shadow color would have been bluish too. There would have been a reflection of blue coming from the blue surface. Do you guys understand? The color of the shadow is the most influenced by the surrounding colors. The color of the shadow changes almost immediately when you change the color of the background. And this is very important. This is actually extremely important. Shadows are so mutable. So everything that belongs in the shadow is less reliable in terms of color. It can be almost any color, actually. As the area of light is more permanent and it's more real, so to speak. So usually the colors of objects don't change that much if you change the color of the light, unless you go to extremes. You know, of course, that if the light source is pure red, then even the yellow sphere couldn't be yellow anymore, because there wouldn't be yellow wavelengths for your eye to see. It would all be red. But let's not talk about extremes now. Let's talk about tinted whites. If the light source is white, you can see all the colors. If the light source is pinkish white, okay, maybe the yellow would go a little bit pinkish. But the shadow of a yellow object, it can even be blue. The shadow sometimes changes color so much that it's not anymore the color of the object. I make it lighter so you can see better. I'm exaggerating on purpose so you guys can really see what I'm showing. The color of the shadow can quickly become the color of the surrounding object. You got it? The terminator is usually dull. Shadows are usually the color of the surrounding object. They're not very similar. I'm just going to quickly melt this away because the orange is annoying me. The orange is still coming through. The orange doesn't want to leave the classroom. Our lesson. Okay, there we go. So shadows tends to be pretty much the color that is next to the shadow. Sometimes they don't look at all like the color of the object. You understand? Shadows are not reliable. Shadows change color all the time. When you are painting something, remember this. The real color of the object is shown in the light, not in the highlight. In the highlight, you don't see the color of the object so much. You see the color of the light source. Okay? The terminator tends to be dull and grayish because there is less light. And the shadows, the shadows can be anything. They're so not reliable. You understand? Now, another question here, which I adore. I really like when you guys ask questions. The question is, if warm shadows recede more than cool shadows? The answer is no. So in terms of color theory, it's usually dull colors that look more far away, and bright, vivid colors look very near. So if the shadow is very cool or very warm, it looks next to you on the painting plane. Okay? Of the two, very bright blue or very bright orange, it's the warm colors that tend to look even nearer. So warm colors are even more next to you. Cool colors are a little bit more far away from you. And it's definitely dull colors that are really far away. So you can see that in landscapes, like distant mountains tends to be a very gray blue. They are cool, they're far away, and they're very gray, they're very dull, so they're far away as well. If you want to represent extreme distance, it's recommended that your shadows go bluish and grayish at the same time. And ideally, pale, not dark. So pale, bluish, grayish shadows look very far away, generally speaking. Understand? Now, these are the basic principles on how to paint a 3D object. Let me summarize. Make all the lights flat. Make all the shadows flat. It's along the terminator that you get many changes of color, from light to dark. Okay? Summarizing, the color of the highlight is the color of the light source. The color of the light in the object, the light parts of the object, is the one that best represents the true color of the object. Shadows, they can be any color. They are usually just a reflection of whatever sits next to them. So shadows are mutable. They change a lot in terms of color. As the light drops towards the terminator, it darkens faster and faster and faster, but it also loses color faster and faster and faster until it becomes almost gray. Remember that grays should not be done by mixing just black and white, because that makes a bluish gray. Summarizing, you remember blue and white, gray and white, sorry, black and white made the bluish gray. And do you recall that when I mixed yellow into it, it quickly became green? No problem. You can either neutralize the gray by adding brown, or you can neutralize that green by also adding brown. It's the same result, you know, so you get a more neutral terminator. Before I move to the next stage of the lesson, I would like to know if you have any questions. So if you have questions, ask them now, because we are going to move to very exciting stages of the lesson. Meanwhile, let's start painting with blue. Okay, I'm going to paint now a blue sphere, and we are going to talk about exactly the same principles. But there will be a problem, because blue is naturally a dark color. Let's see what's going to happen when we paint a blue sphere, okay? I'm going to change my camera. We're going to move, let's move here instead. I'm going to change my camera to a cleaner part of the paper. Okay, here we go. And what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing that we did before. I'm going to use this as my palette, as always. So let's have blue paint ready to be used. Oops, it's dripping a lot. So we have fresh blue paint ready to be used. We're going to have, I'm going to use it already for the shadow shape on the blue sphere. Okay, I'm going to use it already because it's a dark color, so it's very, very, very handy. Okay, here we are, and we have a dark shadow color. Meanwhile, I'm going to squeeze some white, some fresh white paint. Oops. Here we are. Some fresh white paint. It's not coming out. The bottle is almost empty. So I'll squeeze it to the brush instead. And we're going to have fresh white paint. And we're going to mix a general blue color for the lights. Okay, write down on the box below, as the blue darkens towards the terminator, do you keep adding more blue? So for example, option 1, you add more and more blue until you get a really, really lovely dark bright blue in this section. Okay, so this is option 1. Option 2, you add black instead and a bit of blue, so that your Just gonna clean the brush here so that your colors become grayer. And tell me which of the two you think is the most truthful to what we are doing so far in terms of lesson. And then I will reply to your questions again, okay? Let me just bring back again some of the color, and we are going to melt here, and we are going to melt there. So my question is, which of the two halves is more realistic? We're not doing absolute realism because we don't have time today, but which of the two halves is more truthful? Should the bright blue become grayer as it goes to the terminator? Let me muddle this a bit more. Or should it become bluer as it goes to the terminator? Write on your comments below, okay? I want to know your opinion. Meanwhile, I'm going to reinforce even more the color in the shadow because it's already dry, the first layer. Make your shadows quite flat. Avoid painting too many details in the shadows. And then just melt them a bit. Easy. Very, very, very easy. So tell me, which of the two is more correct? Absolutely. So, as the color darkens, it needs to go grayer and then enters the shadow. The shadow can be any color, as I've just explained before. So the left half of the sphere is wrong. Okay, this is wrong. Let's make an X for wrong. And this one is correct. The correct one includes more gray along the terminator. And now I want to ask you something. What about if we have a very, very, very red object next to the blue sphere? So write down on the comments below, what color would the shadow be if we have a very, very red object right next to the sphere? I'm trying to squeeze some red paint and I haven't been lucky. Ah, here it comes. So as always, I'm gonna put the paint here so you can see what I'm doing. This is our wet palette. And I'm gonna paint a red surface right next to the sphere. Again, we're exaggerating because we don't want to waste time with subtleties at this stage. We want to understand general principles. And my question now is also, what about if the light source was greenish? Tell me what would happen to the color of the shadow, and tell me what would happen to the color of the highlight for a greenish light source, okay? Please write full sentences. And Rob already replied. Yes, and Fahmida as well. So congratulations, guys, you said the right thing. The shadow would become a bit reddish or even purplish. Depends on the color of the red and on the color of the blue. But for now, this will do. I'm just gonna give a quick reddish tone. And let's make it a bit paler because it's mixing with the blue and it's making black. I'm gonna put more paint here. Okay, that will do for now. For now, this will do to understand what's happening. And what about the highlights? If the light is greenish, what would happen to the highlights? It would be greenish as well. So I'm quickly going to mix some more color here. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring the highlight and we can make it a bit greenish. Let me add a touch we can make it a bit greenish. Okay, now we have green. So if the light source is greenish, then the highlight would be greenish too. And then of course you would blend and melt the color. If it's a very, very shiny object, the highlight would be sharp, like this. And I'll learn this. This is crucial, what I'm teaching you, okay? If the object is shiny, the highlight is sharp, like this. Actually, let me make it a bit paler because it looks a bit dark. There we go. It's a pale green color now. But if the object is matte, then the highlight blends more into the surroundings. You got it? And the more matte it is, the more blended it becomes. I hope you understand some of the general principles that we are applying right now. And this is very, very easy to paint. It's extremely fast. And because it's extremely fast, you can sketch very quickly from imagination or any of that. So any other questions you have, please ask me now, because we are going to move to the next stage of the lesson. And let me see comments. I'm reading the comments. Indeed, Priyan, applause. The color of the highlight is greenish. And Timney as well. The highlight is greenish and the shadow is not going to be that affected. Good. Now, nobody answered to me yet if it is true that a warm light creates a cool shadow. Do let me know if it's true or not, because I'm very curious. Do warm lights create cool shadows? Yes or no? And I'm going to try to find some examples on the internet, because I want to clarify once for all if this is true or not. Let's begin by looking at, for example, Claude Monet's, oh yes, let's look at Claude Monet's haystack. So Monet, haystacks. There should be nobody like the Impressionists, right, to explain these things. Because if you have color effects in nature, obviously that the Impressionists would be able to paint that. So I'm going now to save this image. And I am going now to show you what I mean by the color of the light, if it affects the shadow or not. Do you think the color of the light affects the shadow? Now, the rule is that, let me just go to lesson 2. I've got everything saved here. And we have now an image to show you. So can you all see this fantastic painting that Claude Monet painted? And you can definitely see that the light is kind of pinkish orange. And you can see that the shadows are bluish. But I keep asking you, is this a general rule? Or is the bluish shadow caused by some contaminant? Rob, you replied correctly. So, it is not true that warm lights create cool shadows. It's not true at all. If anything, warm lights create warm lights and warm shadows as well. If the light source is warm, orangey, in a gray room, the light parts of the object, the lit parts of the object will be orangey as well, and the shadows will also be orangey. So warm lights create warm shadows. Cool lights create cool shadows. Then why do we have in this painting warm lights and cool shadows? Very simple. It's the color of the sky. Didn't I tell you that shadows get quickly contaminated with any other color that is in the room? So the color of the blue sky is lighting up the shadow. And this is why many people mistakenly, and I have to say mistakenly, believe that warm lights create cool shadows. This is factually not true. Warm lights create warm shadows. The only reason the shadows are blue, it's because shadows are quickly contaminated by surrounding colors. So the blue of the sky contaminated the color of the shadow. Understood? So I want you to learn this because this is very important. I want you to learn many things because they are all very important. But now I'm going to carry on teaching and I'm going to show you. Let's change topic because we had enough. Let me just make a quick summary. Summarizing, all colors can be represented, all colors at all can be represented by value, chroma, and hue in order of importance. Value is the most important, so make sure that your darks are dark enough. Make sure that your lights are light enough. Make sure your medium tones are medium enough, okay? Value is the most important element of painting. It's what shows the world. Black and white photos are exclusively values. And you can recognize everything. You can recognize the mountains, you can recognize the sea, you can recognize everything in a black and white photograph. Understood? Second most important is chroma. How colorful something is. If you change all the hues, but you still keep the relationships of value and chroma correct, you will still have an amazing surrealist painting, but somehow the painting will look real. Look at Picasso's blue period. All the faces were blue. And yet, because the chroma and the values are correct, you get a very, very representational image. Understood? I love to have my face hiding. Let's put my eye in the middle of the circle. And finally, hue. Hue is the least important of all. Now, Rob asked a question. Do the same rules hold true for any subject, please? Like shadows in skin in portrait? And the answer is yes. Nature doesn't care if you're painting a portrait or if you are painting a landscape or a fruit or a basket or a cloud. Nature doesn't care. The general principles of light and shadow apply to any subject matter. So yes, indeed, you can have beige skin and, for example, blue shadows. Obviously. Imagine I'm wearing a blue t-shirt, a bright blue. All the underplanes of my face would be bluish because the light would be coming from the t-shirt. So the bottom of my chin would be blue. The lower part of my eyebrows would be blue. The bottom of the nose would be blue because the blue lights would be reflected from my blue t-shirts. And another question is, Mario, you have to consider the shadow on the sphere on the red. The sphere on the... I don't understand the question. Could you please write it down again and then I'll answer to you. And I want to show you the next image. You must know more or less where all your paints are on the color sphere. Okay? So you must know, for example, that Indian red is a shade of red, obviously, as we knew. You must know that yellow ochre is a shade of yellow, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm now showing you, again, I'm showing you what happens when you have a range of yellows. So you can have a bright yellow highlight, and then as it drops into the shadow, not only it becomes darker, but also becomes grayer. Grayer is the important key here. So the lights should be very bright, like bright yellow, the light part of the object. As it darkens, not only it goes darker, but it goes grayer. The terminator is usually quite gray. And then the shadows, they can be any color almost you want. It's just whatever is next to the yellow object. We also did a painting with blue. Remember that this image I'm showing you is wrong, and that's why I am showing you. Can you see how the pale blues are becoming purplish? So this is a bad photo on the internet that I took from the internet that is corrupted. Obviously, that the light blues should be as blue as the medium or dark blues. They shouldn't become a different color. They shouldn't become purple. So please be very critical of what you see on the internet, because you have mistakes like this. Now, I'm going to show you a drawing. And because last time I showed you Henrique Pousão, I'm going to show you now another drawing by Henrique Pousão. This is a drawing made from a cast, and I absolutely adore how painterly this sketch is. So essentially, what you have in here is a drawing that was smudged with a stump, with a paper stump. You can see in the background, actually, all the marks done with the paper stump. And then after everything was sketched with a stump, you have real charcoal being then put on top to make it blacker. It's again smudged, and occasionally you have even blacker accents that were probably made with black chalk, something like the Conte crayon. And one thing I must say is that these lessons, they stay on YouTube, obviously. So you can always revisit the lessons, and you can always look at more things, okay? Because usually one lesson is very crazy. Now I'm going to show you, by special request, some of the students asked me to talk about composition. I'm going to do maybe 5 or 10 minutes of this subject matter. And let's start with myth number 1, which is the Fibonacci ratio or the golden ratio. Are they important in creating beautiful, expressive compositions? And I would like you to write down in the comments below. So, meanwhile, Anna, yes, you can watch the lessons at any time, because every live stream that I do stays on my YouTube channel, and it stays on the live stream section. You can always revisit the lessons. So, Fibonacci, golden ratio, silver ratio. I'm sure you've heard about most of those definitions. And there's a lot of interest nowadays in classical art and the secrets of classical masters. Definitely the art of composition is on the drop. So ancient masters, they composed more intentionally. They wouldn't just compose because it looks good, no. They would use a lot of symbols, numerology. They would use geometry to compose their images. But what about the Fibonacci and the golden ratio. Write on the comments below, do you think they are still useful to represent beauty? Is it true that beautiful things tend to comply to the Fibonacci ratio or to the golden ratio? Is it true that ancient monuments like the pyramids or the Parthenon or paintings like the Mona Lisa follow either the Fibonacci ratio or the golden ratio? Please write now on the comments, and I'm not going to proceed with the lesson until you guys write something. I am waiting. So Mario asked, in my last drawing, I only did shadows on the blue sphere, but it also reflected blue to the red surface or not? Oh, I understand now your question. So the question is, let's go back to the blue sphere I did. It's a bit of a mess. And what Mario asked is that if blue also reflects onto the red surface. And the answer is no. Because the blue sphere is opaque. The blue cannot cut through into this red. The light doesn't really travel. The blue shadow is so weak because it's so dark. There is no way it can affect the red surface right here. It's practically impossible because it's just not strong enough. Remember that this red surface here is being directly lit up by the sun. There is no way that the very weak blue shadow would have such a strong influence on the red surface. Okay? So the colors in the light areas of objects are not affected by the colors of shadows. It's the color of the shadow that is affected by the color in the light. And now let me just quickly, because now it dried, I can finally make the shadow lighter, because it finally dried, so I can give a second coat. You understand? The color of the shadow becomes red. You got it? So this is just a general principle of how to paint objects. Now let's go back to the questions. Is Fibonacci and golden ratio relevant, and do they explain most of the beauty of ancient art? Rob says, I don't think it's true. Canon says Fibonacci or golden ratio is important, but there are a lot of beautiful paintings that don't contain these types of ratio. And you think that the golden ratio is backdated. Okay, we are not far from the truth, guys. You've answered quite correctly. It's really hyped up. People exaggerate the importance of the golden ratio or the importance of the Fibonacci. And I'm going to demonstrate now by showing you an image that I think will clarify for you. This is beauty according to the Fibonacci ratio. Are you ready? I am going to show you something amazing. The most beautiful image ever that follows the Fibonacci ratio. There you are. So, is beauty explained by this kind of mathematical equations? And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but usually, no. And because maybe one example isn't enough, I'm going to show you another example of extreme beauty. So it starts in the arse and it goes all the way up to the mouth. Of course, I'm being ironic. But it's quite obvious that these kind of ratios don't really create extreme beauty in all situations. Nevertheless, there used to be indeed a very strong interest in geometry and in geometric mathematical proportions. Leonardo da Vinci was not the only one to have a huge interest in these topics. Okay? Nevertheless, I have to admit that there is indeed some kind of correlation between beauty and mathematics. But most of the time, golden ratios and Fibonacci ratios are just hyped up, as you saw from the examples below. I'm going to show you now another image. And this image, I'm going to zoom out so you can see it in full. The deposition from the cross by van der Weyden. I think now you can have a clearer idea of the composition. And when you look at the deposition from the cross, it's notoriously that you see some kinds of geometric structure, which I'm going to show you next. So the next image, and by the way, I don't fully believe in the next image, but it shows quite clearly that there is indeed some kind of geometric diagram that represents the deposition from the cross. Indeed, if you trace 3 circles, you get most of the people within those proportions. I'm going to show you another one without the image. It's the same diagram, but this time, so you've got the geometry, and now I'm going to show you the one, just the geometry without the image. Now, I am a bit skeptical of this kind of mathematical analysis, but it is indeed true that there seems to be a circular flow to some of these figures. I told you today's lesson is just an introduction to the art of composition, because it's such a complex subject that I'd rather initiate you gradually. And gradually, can you now see some of the circular movements? But there is another one that is way more important, and that's the one I want to show you instead. Don't think just circles. Think also in egg shapes. So if you look at the blue mantle of the Virgin Mary, it connects to the gray dress, the gray skirt of the lady on the right, and then her body is rounded. So the heads behind her connect to the arm of Jesus, and then the head of Jesus gradually connects to the head of the Virgin Mary and back to the blue mantle. If you want, we can make the egg shape even bigger to include the red, the man wearing red. You definitely have a kind of an egg shape that was used in the past to represent the death of Jesus, symbolically, because the egg, it looks like it's dead, it looks like a stone, it's a dead object, and yet it's full of life. So in Christian paintings, the death of Jesus is like an egg hatching eternal life, because they believe in the resurrection of Jesus. So that means what seems dead is alive. And sometimes what seems alive is dead, I dare to say. So I'm not going to push today much further, because it's a very, very, very complex subject matter, but I want you to realize that there is indeed some kind of geometry used in ancient paintings, but the Fibonacci or the golden mean do not necessarily produce beauty, as per the two examples that I've shown you before. Okay, so let's demystify things. Your paintings will not be better because you follow the Fibonacci rule, the golden mean, the silver mean. No, they will not. The rule of thirds is kind of another myth. Okay, it doesn't really work that well. I'm not going to talk more about this today. A short introduction to the art of composition. And if you have any other questions, ask them now. And then in 2 minutes, let me just drink a glass of water. Dhaka University students, I would like to see you in our Zoom meeting. Meanwhile, we have a question here, which is The Undertaker. Hello, Undertaker. Undertaker says, why are you using brown surface and not white? Hello, Leo. Good to see you. Leo is an amazing painter from Nepal, living now in the Emirates. So I hope things are going well with you. Now, the reason I'm using brown paper is just because I got a big roll of brown paper. I don't know if I can show it to you here. I just got a big roll of cheap brown paper so that every lesson I can just quickly paint something and not be wasting time. I just put the brown paper on the wall like that. That's my other camera. And it's easy. It's just very handy. But yeah, the paper could be practically any color. It doesn't really matter much. Okay, last minute for questions and comments. I would like you all to press like in this video. I would like you all to share this video on your social media and on your WhatsApp groups and so on. Make sure you share it as widely as possible. YouTube does not propagate this kind of lessons. If I was showing shocking things and stupid things and conspiracy theories, don't worry, the algorithm would quickly propagate everything, because this is a lesson for artists at an academic level, university level. YouTube will not propagate this kind of videos. So, as always, as we end the lesson, I just would like you to add me on Instagram. Not that I care about Instagram, but you know, everybody tells me, oh, you have to do it, Nelson. Okay, I do it. So you can find me on nelson.ferreira.visual.artist. Much more important than Instagram, obviously, it's LinkedIn. That's where all the big cats are, you know, the big tigers. They are on LinkedIn. If you don't have LinkedIn, you should open an account as soon as possible. It's through LinkedIn that you can contact museum directors, gallery owners, etc. It's way better than any other platform that I'm aware of. Why not my Facebook professional page, Nelson Ferreira Art Classes Painting and Drawing. You get some gossip in there as well, art gossip, and not just these lessons, a few more things as well. And finally, oh, I just realized my YouTube, of course, you're already there, you're already here. Remember that warm lights do not make cool shadows. This is because the blue light of the sky was influencing the shadow. If the sky was gray, then the shadows would be warm, would be orangey, the color of the light source. Okay? But because the sky is not gray, the sky is blue, the shadows are blue. And I'm gonna show you, finally, one last painting And I'm quite excited to show you this. One last painting that I've just filmed this week. I went to a museum in Portugal, and I'm trying to do higher quality photos and filmings of classical masterpieces, because classical paintings are usually very badly photographed. Now, I didn't have a, how do you call it? Oh, a circular polarizing film. I'm getting tired now, so I think I must stop the lesson soon. I didn't have a polarizing filter, so you will still see reflections on the video. Nevertheless, I want to show you this because I think it's important that we look into high quality, very high quality paintings. And this is a painting that I'm going to show you now. It's called The Drunks by José Malhoa. I'm going to maximize the image, and you will be able to see this painting in very high quality now. I just filmed it, and I'm going to play the video in 4K, so theoretically this live stream is in 4K as well. You should get high quality image. It represents The Drunks, and it was painted in 1907 by José Malhoa. He was one of the leading figurative painters in Portugal. And what you see in here is it's a delight of psychological depiction. You see a group of drunk men. This one already fell asleep. This one is totally going crazy. And look at the beauty. I'm going to make a pause. Look at the beauty of the shadows and how they are all compressed into practically one flat color. So José Malhoa also followed the principle that I was telling you about. The shadows, it doesn't really matter that much. Make your shadows quite simple. By contrast, make your lights complex, and especially the terminators, of course. But let's carry on with the video. Look at the simplicity of the shadows. Look at the amazing boldness of the brush marks. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful the way the paint has been applied. I'm going to make another pause again. And again, all the shadows are practically the same color. In this painting, the shadows are either black or they're dark brown. Something like a raw amber, perhaps a burnt umber in places, but mostly it's raw amber and black. The hair disappears into the hat. You don't really see where one begins and the other starts. So it's amazing how simplified all these shadows are. A lot of expression throughout the painting. The brush marks are bold and visible. Look at this amazing use of rhythm. I mean, you really see the direction of the brush marks representing the direction of the object, the direction of the surface. It's absolutely stunning. Wow, the beauty of the brush marks. To me, José Malhoa, in this painting, The Drunks, is as good as any Rembrandt. He's as good as any Joaquim Sorolla. He's one of the greatest masters from Portugal, and I'm showing you Portuguese painters because they're never seen internationally. So dear students mostly from South Asia, you are now being exposed to a school of painting that even European people don't know very much, because Portuguese painters are very secretive about what they do. This painting belongs to the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Lisbon, but it's actually on display in a different museum. And I wanted to show you this because it's just so stunning. It's so beautiful what we can do with simple shadows. Okay? Learn from the great masters like José Malhoa, for example. And I want to say one more thing. I'm really honored But I created an art academy in Lisbon. I just want to tell you now a bit of gossip. This is not part of the lesson, but I'm so excited. I want to share with you. José Malhoa had an art studio in Lisbon, 100 years ago. And it's in that art studio that I will be teaching painting and drawing every winter, always. So the winter atelier is starting in Lisbon, and we're starting now very soon, in a few weeks' time, with the Bargue drawing course, which everybody should do, by the way. Everybody should learn first how to draw and only later how to paint. So we're kicking off with the Bargue drawing course. It's going to be 4 intensive days, the whole day, similar to what I did at Dhaka University when I was teaching at Charokola. And then we're also doing color mixing and so on. I'm very excited. Now, I'm going to read the last comments. And Rob is asking, how do you paint people in the distance? Do you make them more blue and more value 5, please? I would make it even lighter than value 5. In the very, very, very far distance, I would make them more similar to the value of the color of the sky in the distance. So as objects disappear in the distance, they become more and more similar to the color of the sky. So the value might even be a bit paler. It might even be a 6 or a 7. And of course, if it's a misty landscape with fog, then definitely faraway people disappear into the fog. So the more far away, the more they disappear, the more they become camouflaged in whichever color you have in the distance. Okay? It doesn't have to be a value 5 necessarily. So Canon asks, should we have a complete session on composition? I'm up for that. Are you guys interested in composition? If so, write it on the comments below. And if more than 7 people write that, then I will make a session just on composition, at least 1 hour of composition. But I need at least 7 people writing it down on the comments. Otherwise, I won't do the lesson. I'm getting very practical. So, and Fatima. Hello, Fatima. Fatima from Portugal. Fatima asks if it's the shadows that create this atmosphere in the painting by Malhoa. Yes, it's the simplicity of the shadows that allows you to look at the complexity of the lights without the painting being too labored. Because if you make everything complex, if you make everything detailed, if you make everything full of stuff, your painting becomes really annoying. It becomes really, really too much. So we need areas where the eye can rest. And usually shadows are a good place to make that, as classical masters knew so well. And sounds very good. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you for the congratulations. I'm really excited. Okay, people are replying about composition. Let me see how many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Aha! We're gonna have a lesson on composition. Okay, so next week will be just composition with something else. I always like to show more things, not just one topic. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'm going to reply to a question by Denise. Hi, Denise. So the question is, with portraits, does the shadow take on the background? Denise, I apologize. I don't understand the question. Could you please rephrase it in a way that it becomes easier for me to understand? With portraits, does the shadow take on the background? What do you mean by taking on the background? Do you mean that, are you asking if the shadow gets contaminated, gets influenced by the background color? If that is the question, then the answer is usually no. It's not so much the background that influences the shadow color, it's more the colors of the objects next to the shadow. So if I'm wearing a red t-shirt, the shadows of my face would be very red, even if the wall behind is green. So it's not so much the background color that influences a lot, it's more it's more the bright lit up objects that are sitting next to the shadow. So it's a shame I don't have anything here to show you. Let me see if this works. It's not gonna work, of course. But can you see that my neck is becoming bluer when I put a blue object here? See, my neck, the shadow in the neck, which is almost invisible. This is really difficult to show you. Let me see if I can show you this. Okay, let me change camera, because I believe the other camera's got better color. And let me try to show you. So the neck shadow, you see, the shadow of my neck, it's quite reddish at the moment. But if I have a blue object next to it, notice how the shadows became blue or bluish, more so than without the book. Does this make sense? So the color of shadows is very influenced by the color of objects, but the object must be right next to the shadow. From very far away, the blue book doesn't have any influence on the color of my shadow on the neck. Okay? So I hope this was helpful, this silly and so not photogenic demonstration. And I'm going to shut off and mute myself. I will see you all next week. Dhaka University students, I'm entering the Zoom meeting in roughly 2 minutes. Okay, let me just drink a glass of water and I'll be with you in a second. So thank you everybody and see you next week. If you have requests for topics of lessons, write them on the comments of the video, okay? And then I will try my very best to include those within the live streams. Please share, please like, and help culture spread instead of just conspiracy videos over YouTube, you know. If we do this together, we can reach thousands of people very quickly and get access, give free access to knowledge, because courses cost a lot of money. You would literally spend thousands of dollars or euros or takas or anything just to learn some of these principles. Help me share the videos. Thank you very much. Take care and see you soon. Bye for now.